I hope you enjoyed the Ola break and are ready for your third session. For the second year in a row, we're very excited to welcome on stage the moderator of this session, anchor at Danmarks Radio, Jakob Illeborg.
Oops. Thank you. Thank you very much. A few years back, the person you're about to hear speak was 16 years old and contemplating what to become when she became a real grown-up. Her basic idea was to become a relaxation therapist, to do good in a personal way. She met someone who told her that if she wanted to do that, she better find somebody to make the bread and butter, to make the money, because she probably wouldn't make a lot of money that way. She then trained to become an engineer, and her thought afterwards was to deal with purifying water, this idea that if you could help take something that was dirty and make it cleaner, you could make a difference. And then somebody told her that maybe she should look into IT instead, and she became involved with IBM. Today, she is the CEO of Watson Internet of Things at IBM, and I think you should sharpen your ears and listen to what Helle Valentin has to say, and please welcome her onto the stage.
Thank you. Now, first, Jakob, I'd like to thank you for the promotion from COO to CEO. Very good. Listen, I'm really excited to be here today, and I'm excited because I'm with you who are in charge of the future of Denmark. Now, you did know that your education came with some obligations, right? I have great expectations for you, and I hope I can bring some new thoughts to you, or make you reflect over some of the things that are happening today. The theme here is new technologies and new consumers. And we'll just see if the technology is working. New technologies. Oops. Very exciting. I think I may ask for an assistant to just come and get me to page 1. Okay, can you help me? Page 1? Very good. Excellent. So anyway, what I'll do is I'll talk to you about new technologies and new consumers. What I want to do is to provide a little context. I'd like to take you into the future and talk to you about some technologies that are just around the corner. And then I'll take you back and talk to you and give you some examples about what's happening today. And then I'll talk about you, the new consumer. And in the end, I will give you I'll give you a heads up on something to watch out for, and I'll open for questions in the end. Is that okay to you? Very good. I see some nodding here. Now, if you look, there are 3 major shifts happening in the industries that are affecting a lot of the things that you see. It's cloud computing that enables things to get connected all over the world. It is data, the amount of data that we get from all the connected devices. And the final thing is mobility, the fact that we all expect to have access to data from our mobile devices no matter where we are. And if you look at the world is getting more and more instrumented, interconnected, and intelligent. There are devices out in society that send out signals. And you know the bigger ones, you know from cars, traffic lights, airplanes, these kind of things. But the devices are getting into our everyday lives with household appliances. Could be your coffee maker, could be your dishwasher, your washing machine, could even be your clothes that have devices that send out signals. So these devices can communicate with each other. And this is what we call Internet of Things, when things communicate without human intervention. Now, based on these connected devices and the information from them, we can make better, more informed and more intelligent decisions. Let me give you an example. So my car, if the engine starts and I'm more than 50 meters away, I'll send a signal to my phone and say, Helle, are you okay for your car to start? And I may think, well, actually, I didn't agree with my son to take my car. And from my phone, I can disconnect the fuel injection. Now, now I'll call this, let's call it I'm sure my son would not agree it's an intelligent decision, but let's agree at least it's an informed decision. So this is an example of Internet of Things and making an informed decision based on the data you get from there. Now, the reason I'd like to provide this context is that this is really, really big. Today, we have around 8 billion connected devices. That's already a big amount. But by 2020, we'll have between 30 and 50 billion connected devices. They, in turn, generate about 160 zettabytes of data. Now, zettabyte has 25 zeros. This is a lot of data. Message here is, it's a lot of data. And if you're in a business, it's the bottom line that's interesting, because it's estimated that the value you can derive for these connected devices is around $1.3 trillion. Lots of opportunity here. So, if you look here, this was a little about the context. So on one side you have the technology, on the other side you have the consumer side of things. And we have you, the new consumer. So let's talk about you for a second. Now, there's a lot of things that have happened in this area, and actually, you have more access to data than ever before. The thing is that if you buy something, if you're going out to buy something that's slightly bigger, then odds are you'll go on the internet and you'll search for information about it. You may look for a compare, go somewhere and get a compare of this product versus something else. You might go to a forum and say, what are other people saying about the products? You have a lot of information you have access to. And let me ask you, how many of you are on social media? Okay, probably wrong question in this forum. How many of you are not on any kind of social media? Jakob, brilliant. Excellent. So Jakob, all the rest of the people here, they also generate a lot of information. So every time you write a line, every time you upload a photograph, you generate data. So on one side, you've got the technology, you have access to more data than ever before, and on the other side, you also generate more data than ever before. And we're actually talking about the power shifting to the consumer. Why am I saying that? Well, the thing is that if you buy something which is good, you can post this to all your friends, and you can reach a lot of people sharing your information. The power with the consumer is very, very big. Whether it's good or whether it's bad, you have the opportunity to share your opinions with a lot of people. And it's because of the new technologies that you have access to this and that you actually can have this power. So the question is, what's next? As I said to you in the beginning, I'd like to take you into the future with me. And if you looked on the front page, you saw two tall buildings. And my office, in the tallest building, top floor, and some floors down from me is research, the hardcore guys. And we have a high-speed elevator. So what I did was I went out to the elevator, I took the high-speed elevator down to the research floor, and I went to these guys and I said, I'm going to present at Aarhus University, and they're probably going to be a tough crowd to impress. So I need you to give me something cool that you're working on right now that I'm allowed to share with them. And they came up with 5 examples. So if we look at the first one, with AI, our words become a window to our mental health. You know, with cognitive systems, pattern in our speech and actually also in writing, through that you're able to early detect mental and neurological diseases. Now this can be a game changer. If you have an early detection, you can early treat something. Maybe you can prevent it from developing further, or at least you can give an early treatment. And probably you're sitting down now thinking, well, I'm young. I don't worry too much about getting sick. But does any of you have grandparents? Nobody? Well, think about your grandmother. Imagine if she got some kind of disease where you were able, through early detection, give her early treatment. Probably you could significantly improve her life quality. It really makes a difference if you're a healthy person. It's both for yourself, but also for the people surrounding you. So being able to early detect diseases and treat them can be a game changer, certainly for the person involved. Let's look at the next example. Hyper-imaging and AI will give us superhero vision. Now, you can imagine yourself being, of course, a superhero, but if we look in a bit of a broader context, we'll be able to see things that are currently not visible. Let me give you an example of how you could apply this. Imagine if you have a car, and do you know what it's like if you drive, if the weather is bad, you have the snow coming towards you, you have limited visibility, or in bad rain. Imagine if you had this technology applied to your car, and it could detect that 50 meters further ahead, there is something on the road. It'll be able to give you an early warning, something you cannot see today, give you an early warning, and this is something that potentially could save lives as well. Think about a completely different application about this superhero vision I'm talking about. Imagine that you have an app on your phone, and you're able to scan a picture of your food and get to know what the nutritional value is of the food you're going to eat. So this technology will be coming out, and there are many different appliances to that. Now, macroscopes will help us understand the Earth's complexity in infinite detail. Now, you know what a microscope is. So with a microscope, you zoom down and you see things that are not visible just here and there. With a macroscope, you do the other thing. You can see things around you here, but if you lift yourself up and look from a bigger perspective, with the help of all the connected devices, we'll have access to data and can see megatrends that we don't know today. These are things where we'll be able to see patterns in weather, in different agriculture things, where we correspondingly, if we are able to detect trends early, megatrends, big things that are changing, are able to also find better solutions, be it to food, drought, water shortage, you name it. Fourth example is then medical labs on a chip will serve as health detectives for tracing diseases at nanoscale. Now, new techniques can detect tiny bioparticles in bodily fluids, and if you combine that also with information for an Internet of Things, you're also able to predict diseases before you even have symptoms. So this is again about early detection of things. And again, if you can detect something early, you can prevent it, or you can at least treat things early. It's two different approaches where you can really make a difference. And this is something that'll be coming out. And again, medical labs on a chip is something where you can also say, it's small, so instead of having things that are big scale, you can look at tiny laboratories here. Today, if I go to the doctor, odds are that he might take a blood sample. And most likely he will say, well, you need some broad-spectrum antibiotics if there's something wrong. And yes, it will probably catch most of the things, but it also affects a lot of other things in my system. If you get down at nanoscale, you'll be able to be much more precise about diagnosis, and correspondingly, you can do much more precision medication, and therefore avoid side effects. The last thing I just want to mention here, the example, fifth example, is that smart sensors will detect environmental pollution at the speed of light. Today, you as a company, of course, can have sensors that detect whether smoke, whether water, whether anything around you, whether your pollution is good or bad, or pollution is always bad. But you can do it as a company. We as a society can also monitor the environment around us. And with the new technology, we'll be able to have a much better insight into what is happening. You all know about the greenhouse effect. We talk about the greenhouse effect, and usually it's CO2 that we talk about. There is another culprit, which is methane gas, also invisible, something you don't notice. There is actually, for instance, in the US, with all the oil installations, methane is very often let into the air. So something that's really, really bad for the greenhouse effect, but nobody sees it. Again, if you can get in early, detect it, avoid it, limit the damage done, it'll do a lot of good to the society. And also the examples I've mentioned here, it's technology we're working on right now. It's not quite there. But the reason I think it's so exciting to work with the new technologies is that I see that there is some potential to tackle some of the big questions we have here in society. Big diseases, pollution, be more responsible in our treatment of the world here. So the thing is that we're not quite there, but the good thing is that the future has already started. So, if you look from an IT perspective, we are in the third era of computing. What we've had first is calculators, simple machines. Then we're into the programmable computers. It's most of what you see today. And where we are now is in the cognitive area, where we use AI. If you look within IBM, when we talk about AI, we talk about augmented intelligence. We are in an era where we focus on the collaboration between man and machine. So we focus on solutions that provide a better foundation for man to make decisions. And if we look at where we are today, I'd like to give you some examples as to where technology is actually used today to be a little more specific. So, let's look at how we are improving our everyday lives. I'd like you to do a thought experiment with me. I'd like you to all to close your eyes for a second and take a deep breath. And then I'd like you to imagine a steak on a frying pan. Hear that sizzling sound and smell the smell. And see that it's getting brown in just that right way. You may open your eyes. And you will think right now, well, what does food have to do with technology? But food can actually have something to do with technology, or cooking can. Because we have, as an example of something that's available today, we have Chef Watson. And Chef Watson, we've taught the chemical composition of a number of ingredients, lots of ingredients, and then we've taught it 10,000 different recipes. And now it's able to say what are things that go well together. And it's something that's available online, so you can go home and then, if I think back at my study time, you can open your fridge and you can say, well, based on the 4 ingredients I have in my fridge, what are things I can cook out of that? So you can test it when you get back. Another example of technology that is at play right now is at hotels. I don't know about you, if I get to a lot of places in the world, if I get to a hotel, the hotel room is usually too cold. So I need to worry about how do I turn the aircon down? How do I do the various things? In a number of hotel rooms today, you can voice activate a number of services. And that means that I can come in and I can say turn aircon off, or I can turn down the blinds, as an example of how you voice activate services. And the same thing in hotels. In certain hospitals. I was unfortunate that I was in hospital not too long ago. And the thing is that you lie in the bed and no matter what you need help for, you need to ring a bell. And then you'll have somebody running to you as a nurse or somebody qualified from the hospital, and they need to come down and check you because they don't know whether you're dying or whether the blinds need to be turned up. Now, this is a lot of the services you need to do, because if I'm lying down and I have the light right in my eyes, it's pretty annoying to me even when I'm not dying. But the thing is that if you can voice activate some of those services, it's not extra value to me that it's a person who comes down and help me. And frankly, if it's a nurse, she wasn't educated to come, she didn't go to school or think, I have a calling to be a nurse to turn down the curtains for me. So there's a lot of possibility for actually freeing up warm hands to do the right things rather than doing trivial tasks, which is part of a lot of the things that are done at hospitals today. So this is an example of how we can improve everyday lives with new technology. Another area to look at is actually improve customer experience. Now again, if you look at the hotel, or not the hotel, the tall building on the front page where I'm sitting, next to it there is a hotel. And we're working with this hotel on a concierge service. You'll see the robot here is wearing German Lederhosen, so it's from Bavaria. And basically, again, with self-service, you can go up and you can get help with a number of different things. So you can ask it, what are the bus times? What are the breakfast times? You can actually ask it any kind of things. You can have a stupid robot to do that, just Q&A. Or you can have, as we have now, empowered with Watson, meaning that it gets more and more clever, will know more and more things, and based on questions and answers for previous visitors, it'll be able to give you a better and better answer. So these are examples of something that are in use right now. You have that in a number of shops as well. You probably know about personalized shopping experience and things you can get assistance with, many different places. Let me just mention one other area, which is wearables. How many of you have some kind of wearables? Some people? 50%? 30%? Well, anyway, this is an area that we'll see exploding. This is actually an area where a lot of things have happened. We're into the third or fourth generation of wearables here, where now it's not just a tech gadget, it's something where design has improved, and this is what we'll see more and more. And this thing about collecting health data is something that will also be used in many different business models, different places. Now, the final thing I just want to mention is that we also use this new technology working with advertising companies, where we help build informed social media campaigns for their brands. I'm getting into somebody else's area here, but the message here is that nowadays a pretty face is not just a pretty face. So if you want to target a certain audience, you need to make sure that it's what is associated with that particular person matches your target group. And here we use Watson to actually search. We can go out, for instance, and say we want to check, we want to find somebody compassionate, and then check 20,000 words about this particular person or more to find, is this person the right match? Or to search and say, well, actually these 5 or 10 or 100 models would be appropriate to use in this campaign. So, listen, I provided a little bit of context. We looked into the future. I've given you some examples of where we are today. And I remember I talked to Lasse here from the university, and he said, well, Helle, are there some things we should look out for? And the short answer is yes. And if there's just one word I should use, then it's data privacy. With all these connected devices, there's a lot of data floating around. A lot of you are on social media. Do you know what your data is being used for? There was recently an article that said 98 things this or that social media knows about you. Now, if somebody knows 98 things about me, that's quite a lot. So one thing I'd ask you to do is to be a conscious consumer. Think about how you use your data. I think it's great. I embrace using the new technologies and the new social media, but I think it's important to ask questions and say no if you don't think it makes sense. So ask the companies who provide services to you to be transparent. Tell them if you don't want them to use your data. It's perfectly fine to switch off certain services or be critical which ones you actually use. And I think that we are now at a stage beyond where just getting an app and saying, yeah, you can have access to all my contacts and all my photographs. You're hopefully beyond that, and you can be critical to say, well, maybe I don't need a free service to do that, or I'll use another service where I kind of feel a little more in control. Now, there'll be a lot of data out there, data about you. It can and will be used, but you need to be this powerful consumer who asks questions. And if I look here, we've kind of come full circle, because the technology enables new behaviors, but you as a new consumer also require new technologies, bring up demands for new technologies. And I think what's interesting right now is that we see all these trends and what we can do. It's across geography, it's across age, it's across socioeconomic background. These things happen. We have a lot of power, and I think those companies that act ethically correct and that you put up requirements for. I think you as a powerful consumer can make a lot of difference, and I would ask you to be a conscious and powerful consumer going forward. Thank you very much.
Wow, ladies and gentlemen, what a fascinating glimpse into the future, but the future is actually also here today. Now, I think I was the only one who got my hand up to say that I was not on social media.
We'll talk about that after.
Yeah, the reason I'm not is because I'm quite cautious of what people know of me. I'm a public person, and I'm not sure that I want people to know everything about me. So this is a choice I've kind of...
Perfect.
I might want to change it later, we can discuss that. But I think, you know, there are so many great questions, and ladies and gentlemen, do get involved now. We don't have that much time. Sharpen your minds. Make sure that you get involved and put up your hand to put up a question, or just use your stylo. A lot of people have already done that. And I'd like just to read the most popular question, and I think this is interesting because these are young people, and they are worried as well. This one goes, why should we not be shit scared, pardon my French, of artificial intelligence? How do we ensure a fail switch in a system whose aim is to operate autonomously? And I think this is a great question. Please answer.
So listen, I think there is a lot of potential with a new technology. And that was the case actually previous times as well, when new technologies came on board. So I think always when you see a new technology arising, you look at, you know, there are some scary scenarios and there are some positive scenarios. I said in the beginning, in the opening session, that you need to put things into context. So there is a natural evolution of the things that we are doing here. I'd like to mention that within IBM, we've been working on artificial intelligence for 50 years. So artificial intelligence is not new. So I think it's new that we talk so much about it, but the whole concept is really not that brand new. And that, I think, is part of what people forget sometimes. And then I'll just say that personally, I think it's the right thing to focus on how we use the new technologies to provide a good foundation for the human to make the final decision. So that is this thing about talking about augmented intelligence. For me, it's not about now the orcs are coming or whatever, taking over the cyborgs or taking over the world. It's about saying, how can we use the technology to make better and more informed decisions?
But having said that, and I agree with this, and you mentioned the 5 interesting points right now. All of them, I think, are extremely fascinating, but I get scared as well. For instance, with the one about picking up medical data about you. Now, of course, this makes a lot of sense if there's a treatment for your disease. If there's not, chances are, I would suggest that you will become sort of an outcast, somebody that can't get insurance, somebody that people will shy away from. Now, surely this is the dangerous aspect to this wonderful futuristic world.
There are several aspects again, Jakob. So there is the thing that technology is usually not the thing that's holding back development. But what you have is that in this whole context, you need also to have legislation and actually the human adoption of the technology. That's usually actually what is holding it back. So this thing that the politicians have a role to play, we as big companies, corporations, have an obligation to help the politicians make the right legislation. And then there is the whole thing about you as a powerful consumer. I've just told you, you're not a powerful consumer because you're not online, but the other ones are. That you can voice your opinions. You can be very powerful in saying, I don't think we should do this, or making sure that there's the right rules of engagement. And you can support that the companies that have the right values and the right ethics, or you can block them out. This is the power of the consumer society, which is new. You haven't had that before.
Now, I think, and please do raise your hands if you have questions. I'm sure many of you do. I think this kind of falls into 2 categories. One of them is sort of the ethical, moral issues of this brand new futuristic world, and the other one, I think, is about business opportunities and what you guys can make of it. So let's get a question about that. There's a nice one here I found, if I can find it. Anyway, it was something, let me find it here. I think the question was about how will artificial intelligence, Watson, etc., influence the financial sector?
Well, there are a lot of things that can be done in the financial sector, and two very good areas where we work is, for instance, on this cybersecurity and whitewashing. So these are two areas with a lot of criminality where it makes total sense to really team up and do something. So those are two big areas you absolutely can and must work on in the financial sector.
Now, could we go as far as to say, if you're not on board, fully on board, you're not even on, then you're not part of the future. But should all these young people here, should they kind of go, is this way or it's no way?
Jakob, I think you're still okay. You're not on. So
Just about.
But I think that it's important to actually embrace new technology. But to be, like I mentioned, to be a conscious consumer. So I'm not saying that you should go all in. I had a conversation here earlier with some students, some of the best students from Aarhus University, and they asked me the question as well to say, well, are you saying that shall I let go of my privacy to have access to the new services? And that's not what I'm saying. I think that you should go in and say, well, what's the potential? How can I help influence how we use the technology? But also be critical. So I'm not saying that you should let go of your privacy at all, Jakob.
There's another good question from Mikkel U here. How do you think artificial intelligence will influence education in the future?
Oh, there are many good things here. I mean, for one, I'd like to mention the fact that we... can I expand the question to be technology?
I think so, yeah.
Because...
Mikkel U, is that all right? Yeah, okay.
Very good. I truly believe that education will fundamentally change in the future. Because of technology, you can do things where you can access universities. Actually, people who these days maybe not be able to afford going to university, now all of a sudden can have access to it. I think that's a game changer, will be a game changer all over the world. So this thing about having education is something more people will get access to. But I also think that education in its current form will change, same as education in society as such, because today it's very much, you go to school, then you go to work, and then you retire. In the future, the world you're going to live in is going to be a little more iterative, that you do some education, and therefore this thing about having maybe smaller sequences, this thing that you do remote learning. I do some online training every week, and I don't want to go to a face-to-face thing necessarily. I like meeting people, nothing wrong with that, but I also think it's very practical to be able to do something. If I wake up at 6 o'clock Saturday morning, maybe I want to do 2 hours on cybersecurity, and I can do that. So I think that the new technologies enables a different way of learning, and that will impact the next generations after you.
I'm personally a big fan of person-to-person stuff, and luckily there's a young man down there that wants to stand up and ask a question.
How do you think it's going to affect the labor market with the AI and evolving technologies? Like, for example, why do we need a doctor if we can be diagnosed by a machine or also treated with a machine?
Let me go back to this thing about augmented intelligence. Now, I can go on the internet today and I can self-diagnose myself. We can discuss whether I'm good at that or not. I think for now, we should focus on how we can use the technology to have qualified people make the final decision there. That's still my belief, that we should do that.
There are great questions coming up here, and I'll ask one of them in a sense, in a second. I'm just going to, for me right now, when I see what you're presenting here, which sector do you think will be first to really, really feel the impact of this? We've been talking about the transport sector, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think this is where we will see these changes hitting first and with most effect?
Well, to be honest, I think all industries will be affected by this. And so there will be some ups and downs. There are some sectors that are a little more conservative than others. Now, personally, I work on Internet of Things, and what we see there is obviously the industrial companies. They're the first movers there. They're doing a lot there. But there is interest from all sectors, so it's just different pockets they'll get into. But it's something we'll see impacted in all industries. And the medical sector was mentioned before. That is an obvious area where you where you can go in and do a lot of things, typically in the areas where you have an exponential growth of information, where you as a person may not be able to grasp this, but where the machine is able to help you in the process.
I've seen you, and I'm gonna.
And I know Miriam.
That's
Miriam
your
from
question.
Germany. Very good.
I want to ask a specific question to your example regarding the nurse who's closing the blinds even though she didn't go to school to do that. I was wondering, isn't there also a value to human interaction? Like, just because it's not value-adding thing like in business terms, but maybe she has a nice conversation with you and she cheers you up, or, I mean, there's maybe also some other kind of value.
Look, I have nothing against humans. I love the human interaction, but there are things where I'd prioritize it. And maybe in this particular example, Miriam, she comes to my room 10 times. I'd rather have her come one time where we have time rather than her saying, is she now calling again with the blinds? So I think we need to sort those things. And there are, so for the trivial things, I'm perfectly happy to do self-service. I'd love to have a conversation as well.
Good question. There are surprisingly quite a lot of questions from these young people about the ethical issues.
Yes.
And I think this one from Jonas M. is a great one.
Mm-hmm.
How can you track large amounts of data from people while still respecting personal privacy?
Mm-hmm.
It's a paradox, isn't it? You collect data, but you respect their privacy?
Yeah, no, but it's not a paradox. If you're in the IT world, at least, you can anonymize data, and actually a lot of the things, if you look at trend data, it's really not important for me who it comes from, but it's important to see that 10,000 people do the same thing. So this is something you technologically, you can anonymize data, and that is anonymized data that's used for big trend analysis here.
Right. Again, questions, stand up and ask questions. There's another one here.
Can I say something without a
question?
question?
Yes, you can. Please.
So I had the privilege of having a conversation with some of the students here before, and we actually did discuss the ethical dimension. And I'd just like to say that I think this is important. From IBM, we've come out with, you can call it an AI charter that goes on purpose, transparency, and skills. And I think that's really important. It's important to know what's the purpose of what you're doing, and with AI in particular, that you mention, for us, the purpose is to provide a better foundation for businesses to make informed decisions. And when we say transparency, then it's about your data is your data, and we tell you how it's used, ask you how you want us to use it. And then finally, on skills, from our perspective, it's important to help and contribute to the education of people, and people like yourself, students, on what's happening in society, so we have a contribution here to bringing more knowledge.
Now, we agreed before that we were not going to bring up big companies and talk about companies as such. So I will refrain from doing that, but I think it's important because we're talking about transparency now.
Mm-hmm.
And you say transparency is very important. I think we all agree about that. As a journalist, I've found out over the last years that some of the biggest companies, the biggest conglomerates in the world, they preach transparency, they preach openness. But if I want to get to them and ask them critical questions, they shy away. This is some of the biggest companies in the world now, and this is not only Danish Broadcasting Corporation, it's BBC, it's New York Times. If you ask them critical questions, they say, do you know what? We don't really want to talk to you. And that worries me.
Yeah, and I agree. I can only say from my perspective, transparency is absolutely key. And I think that I just told you are powerful consumers. And I think this thing about supporting businesses that then have the right ethical values or transparency or these things that you also as a journalist, because you can then say, well, these companies were not willing to talk to me. I think you have an important role to ask the critical questions as a journalist. And we as consumers have to also demand transparency from the companies that we deal with. And in the future, when you're leaders, also to make sure that you do business with people who have the right values.
So voting with your feet or
Yep.
asking the critical question is important.
Exactly,
There's a good
Jacob.
question from
Yeah.
MB here. If consumers are increasingly more influenced by big tech companies choosing what we see online, is power then really shifting to the consumer?
Yeah, so you mean, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, if consumers are increasingly more influenced by big tech companies choosing what we see online, is power then really shifting to the computer? So
So I'm mixing because I'm thinking that if you buy things online, I'm thinking that's more in the retail. So what's the technology?
I think what the MB is hinting at is that in a sense we are more and more influenced by what big tech companies want us to watch or do, whatever it might be. If that's the case, is it really us making the call, or is it the computer making the call for us?
Well, I still see that there is a lot of liberty of changing or choosing who you deal with, and it's not all purchases start with a search. Oftentimes, Jakob, if you want to buy something, you know about things, you talk to your friends, so you're not 100% depending on searching for something and then being dependent on what the search engines find for you.
Right. Now there's another good one here, I think. This is Jan, and Jan's question is, amount of collected data.
Mm-hmm.
Are we ever running out of memory space?
I'm happy to say we sell solutions for that. So I don't think so.
No. How does Watson Internet of Things take personal ethics into account?
And what do you mean by personal ethics?
Well, it's an anonymous question. Does the person that asked that question wish to maybe sharpen the pen a little bit so we know what they mean?
If not, let me just go back to this thing about, so you said personal ethics? Or
Yeah, how does Watson Internet of Things take personal ethics into account?
I can say that I don't think that if we talk about Internet of Things and the solutions we do with Watson Internet of Things, we make business solutions, and ethics is this thing about being transparent, telling you what we use data for, and we as a company actually don't collect your data, so we're not interested in anything personal about you. So in that sense, personal ethics is a non-issue if we talk about my division.
Right. There's a good one here. Yeah. I fully agree that in several areas voice activation is useful, but is there a risk of bringing it too far and making life too easy and lazy, in a sense that by having everything sorted by voice activation, you take away the fun of life?
Well, I say that again. You need to voice. You need to, vote with your feet. I'd expect if you go into a hotel room actually that's voice activated, that you should also be able to and allowed to switch it off, so you can decide whether you want it or not. So in that sense, you can make the choice, but you need to make the choice yourself.
Right. There's a good one here from CA. Is IBM, or the world in general, inevitably trying to create a world with 100% information, a utopia?
I'm not sure I understand the question. If it's
Are you trying to create a world where, is this how I should understand it, where the world, where we know everything about everything, everything is, it's everything is built on something that's already perceived, in a sense that we become surplus to if everything,
yeah.
this is sort of a machine of a man, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
So I think that certainly that is not an explicit goal from us at all. So again, it's about having the foundation for making better and more informed decisions. I think that there will be data about a lot of things, and you are able to collect data about all kinds of aspects. So in that sense, we'll have a much more transparent or much more informed society. In that sense, it'll change. There'll be an evolution. You are able to find out a lot of different things that you don't know about today. Whether it's a utopia, wouldn't use that word.
No. There's a question here. Lovely, fantastic.
According to evolutionary psychology, the human brain has not developed for 100,000 years. However,
Scary.
modern societies have of course changed a lot. How do you think that these new technologies and AI will impact on the human mental health?
Now, I refer to a doctor if there is a kind of a physical evaluation of the human brain, what happens there. But like you say, it hasn't evolved for a long time or changed significantly. Yet we've been through different stages of the Industrial Revolution. So again, I'd refer to the context, the things that have happened before, and say that this is yet another technological evolution, and there'll be other things coming down the road that we don't know about yet. If there is a physiological impact, you'll have to ask a doctor.
There's a good one here from Mikkel H. As a top leader, how do you keep track of rapid change in new technologies? Because there's so much to look out for.
Absolutely. Well, I follow a number of different topics, and therefore, like I said before, this thing about education is not something I finalized a number of years ago. I do something every day, so I keep track of different topics. Do I know everything? Absolutely not. But by following a number of different topics and a number of different people, I kind of follow those things that I think are important.
I'd like to play a little game because there's so many people that have these ethical concerns here.
Yeah.
Could you please, all those that are worried about the impact of artificial intelligence on your future, raise your hand. About half?
Yeah.
What does that tell you?
No, I think it's really, really valid to ask questions and be a critical consumer. I think that it's actually a super healthy attitude to say, wait a minute, how can we use that? And one thing I'd like to call out that I've seen, which is really good in Denmark, is that we actually have a lot of coverage of this in the papers, by the politicians. So I think that one critical element is to have the open discussion and say, what does it mean for this? So all the speculations going into different scenarios. The first thing is to be conscious about what's happening, making sure it's debated at all levels, and then understanding how do we deal with the various things. So I think that the first step is to say, I'm worried, and then talk about it and find out how do we then deal with it. Because the technology is there, and stopping the technological evolution is not possible, but we can decide how we influence, how we use it in society. The one thing I would mention in this context is that we in the Western world live a pretty comfortable life. There are people other places in the world who have a burning platform, who have a lot to win, and therefore it's important to not say, well, I don't want anything to do with the new technology, but to think the thought through and know that if the technology can bring some leaps, do some leapfrogging different places, there will be people who use it. And what does that mean? And I mean, therefore, it's really important to have the dialogue, to say, well, how do we do, what are the things for legislation, what are the things I want my data used for, but also then follow what are happening around the world.
There's a good one here, and maybe Asger Sandal should help me on, but I'm not quite sure I understand all of this. What is your view on the bottleneck in communication from human to machine? Will neural links be crucial for humanity in the future? I'm not quite sure I understand what neural links is, but maybe you do. Do you understand it?
No, yeah, sorry.
You do understand
that was the brief one. No.
Asger, explain.
Yeah, okay, so a neural link would be some device that can actually read your mind. So the concern is that in the future, AI would be able to communicate with each other and
without us knowing it?
What?
Without us knowing that they do it? That's what you mean.
Maybe not.
Okay.
But the concern is that they would be able to communicate much more information to each other than we can, because we can only write 10 letters per second maybe on our keyboard. So maybe but the other way, we can actually process a lot of information with our own brains, but we can't give the AI the same information back. So that's what I mean by a bottleneck. So will a mind reader be crucial for humanity, for people to be able to compete against
AI? So we're talking mind reading now. Yeah. I like it. Yeah.
I mean, will AI be too big of a competitor if we don't get it? That's my concern.
Well, there are many different paths you can take this whole discussion. Again, and there are many opportunities for how you can use the technology. Whether mind links is going to be crucial, you can debate it. I think that the focus again should be on how you can. You need to figure out how you focus how you use AI. And again, it's similar to data, the huge data amounts. People come to me, and typically when I have a discussion with a company, they'll say, well, we've got all these ideas, all these things. And just because you can do it, it's not the same that you should do it. Right. So I think, again, it's up to us to make some conscious choices as to where's the value for us, for the company, for society, and therefore make some conscious choices in this process.
But I forget what the rule is called, but certainly it goes something like, if it can be done, it will be done. Mm-hmm. So in a sense, if that's the case, then that point is very valid, because at some stage the computers will be so clever, or probably already are, but they will be so far superior to us that we will no longer be needed.
Yeah, I think we're a ways away from that. So just like Margrethe Augen said, she didn't plan her career. I think that if we make look 50 years out, there are a lot of things that look different. I don't think that we're able to see that far out, and I don't think it's just around the corner.
Right. Now, if I was their age,
yes,
and I was listening to you,
yes,
I would go, bloody hell, I want to be part of this.
Yep.
What should these young people do to go down the road you're going down? What would your advice be to young people who were like, I want to be part of this?
Do you want to be part of this?
Yeah. Anybody here who feels this is fascinating, want to be part of it? Raise your hand. Wow.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah. I'm doing some recruiting here afterwards. It is exciting, and that's why I'm there as well. Because it's like, there's so many things happening to be part of it, to be able to form some of the future. It is it's a very exciting place to be, and I think that you can influence what is happening from different aspects. So you can work directly on it from a technical perspective, but you can also, from a business perspective, go into a business and make sure you use the new technology. Because right now, there is a big gap actually from, if I talk to board members, people are typically very informed and know about all the new things and think it's really fascinating, absolutely want to do it. But then often, if you look then down at the operational level, there's quite a big gap. So right now, there's a big need for actually getting to a certain level where you can, before you can really get the big benefits for the of the new technologies. So there is a transition that will happen here over the next 5 years. And I mean, so a great opportunity is actually to go and work with some of the companies about using new technologies as well. Right. In addition, of course, to coming directly to us and work with the technologies.
Well, now, do you still read paper newspapers? Like
yeah, and I can read, yeah.
Do you do it on a daily basis?
Not on a daily basis.
No?
I enjoy to sit with a newspaper, but it's more kind of a...
Because I was just thinking that, I still do it, obviously, not being
Since you're not online, I'd be worried if a journalist didn't read it.
But I find it that when you read a newspaper, you tend to read articles that you did not know you wanted to read. My concern with all this design, smart design, is that you end up just doing the things that you or your robot friend thinks you want to do. And thereby you end up narrowing yourself rather than expanding your interest.
So in terms of getting information, is that the question is whether you get information
yeah,
which is kind of
that
broad
I
enough?
like to read. You know, I would open a paper and read about a frog that's about to be extinct. I didn't know I wanted to read about that frog.
Yes.
But actually reading about that frog will make me think about I should go on a holiday to a certain country. And, you know, this kind of way that the mind jumps when you get information you didn't know that you wanted.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think it's a fair point. Yeah. I mean, in this whole context, if I can add an extra dimension, I've also grown up with people like you, critical journalism, where you didn't print anything till you had 3 different sources validating it's true. Where these days, a lot of the things you'll read on the net is something, I mean, anybody can post something, so not everything is equally validated. So I mean, there's a lot of responsibility back on you to be critical and actually search multiple sources and get your information from multiple sources. And I think, because if you just go to one place and search, or just see one paper online, you will exactly just have that very narrow view that somebody almost decides for you. So I think this thing about searching multiple media is absolutely important, Jacob. Yeah.
There's a good question here from Dian. How do you feel about people being integrated to Internet of Things through, for instance, personal chips? Is the connectivity worth it when you take into comparison the ethical issues? So do you gain more than you lose, I suppose, is the question.
Well, I think it's a kind of, it has to be a personal choice. There will be people who think this is the greatest things and want to be totally integrated. Again, I believe it's good to have a choice so you can opt in and opt out.
Right. Was there a question there?
Yep.
There's a question here. Great.
Thank you. I was wondering, it's more like the vision for Watson and the Internet of Things and all this big data buzz. I was wondering, do you expect in the foreseeable future that we will get to a point where we have 100% transparency throughout all data in our world gathered in a central AI hub, or will you see it as more like individual hubs where you have developed Watson and your Internet of Things like system for it, and other companies have developed their equals, so we'll actually end up being in a separate AI networks? Or how do you see like the far development of this? Thank you.
The short answer to your first question is no. So you said if everything, all data is going to be collected together and have full transparency. The answer is no, because actually 80% of the data that exists today, not the newly generated data, but that is within the individual companies, and that's their own data. So actually being able to use that data, probably combined with external data, is going to be very powerful, but I don't think as a company you want to let go with all your internal data. And actually I think that we've had kind of a period where you've seen all the startups, a lot of companies that have gotten a lot of hype about born on the web companies. There is actually a next phase now where probably companies that have a lot of knowledge, they have a lot of data, once they put this data to work, have historic data that the new companies don't have, there is actually a big potential for getting some business benefit out of this historic data.
Right. There's a good question here from Sophia Set, which basically, as I read it, goes something like this: any limits to what Watson can't do? Are there things that you think now and in the future Watson will simply not be able to do?
I don't know if I don't think my imagination goes as far as to all the things that Watson can do. We purpose Watson, right? So we teach it those areas. So if we say if it's oncology, we teach it about cancer and cancer treatment diagnosis. We teach it about the various things. So we actually do that kind of focus on different industries. And I mean, it's a matter of kind of the things you choose to teach it.
Right. There's another very specific question here, and I'm not sure whether you can answer it or not, but I'll ask you anyway. This is from A. How do you see bitcoins? Serious or not, what is your take on bitcoins?
Pass.
Pass. Have you been discussing
actually,
virtual...
let me talk about something else and
right.
say that I'd like to mention blockchain.
Yeah.
Blockchain is a really powerful thing that's coming as well. So I have great expectations for blockchain. I think it's a very powerful technology. That's something to watch out for, absolutely.
Right. If we were to sort of, let's just try and contemplate it. You might shy away from it, but let's say that we were standing here in 10 years' time. How much has the world changed in 10 years? Because from what you talk about here, to me it's like a completely different world to the world I grew up in. And I'm fascinated and I'm scared at the same time.
Yeah.
How much will it have changed in 10 years?
And if I say 8?
You can go 8.
No, I think Jacob, there's no doubt a lot has changed. I mean, 10 years is a lot of time when you look at all the things I mentioned to you in the future. They're within the next 5 years. Now, these are technologies we're bringing out. Then it's a matter of companies to use these ones to apply them to different products. I mean, we're just making the technology available. How companies decide to use them is up to them. So in certain areas, I think that probably sometimes the development goes slower than you think, and in other areas, they move a little faster. But there's no doubt, 10 years, a lot of things will have happened here.
Maybe we should meet up in 10 years again.
I'm very happy to do
Yeah.
that, Jakob.
I think, ladies and gentlemen, that we should put our hands together for Helle Valentin. This has been fascinating, Helle.
Good. Thank you.